On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, I'm joined by John Karalis of Locked On Celtics to tell you why Josh Hart and Kristaps Porzingis are going to be the defining figures in Knicks Celtics.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Gavin, Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster and a credentialed media member who's been covering the New York Knicks for almost a decade. You are listening to Locked On Knicks, your favorite daily Knicks podcast, covering the Knicks, of course, 5 times a week, at least. Recently, it's been more like 7 or 8 times a week. If you want to tune in, be sure to subscribe on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform of choice to get every single episode every single day. We want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. This is a really fun one. Me and John get into everything Knicks Celtics, what the vibes are like in Knicksland after a tough series against the Detroit Pistons. Am I still optimistic about their chances in this series? And then we talk Celtics, like what changed for them coming out of the Magic series? What are the best ways to defend them? What are the best ways to attack them? And just as I mentioned earlier, why Josh Hart and how the Celtics cover him will be a defining feature in this series. And why the Knicks might want to let Kristaps Porzingis be the one to try and beat his old team. We'll get into all that and more right now here on Locked On Knicks.
All right, Gavin, this was our destiny. Celtics, Knicks. We kind of knew at the beginning of the season, the 1, 2, 3 of the East was probably going to be Cleveland, Boston, New York. That's how it worked out. And the second round,
I love the Sixers erasure right off the bat. That's something we can bond over, John. I like the not even the current dismissiveness, the retroactive dismissiveness. I appreciate it. So let's bond over that before it gets me.
I think that the meme with our two like clenched fists together, we can bond over our collective hatred of the Sixers. So this is the second round series we expected. So this is fun. This is going to be good. You guys had a tough fight with the Pistons, who, they're kind of like the playoff darlings, right? Everybody loves the Pistons, which is so weird to say from a Boston perspective. Let me just get your general feeling here. How do you feel about the Knicks based on how that series went?
Not super dissimilar from how I felt coming out of the regular season, that they are a very talented roster that is being fairly mismanaged right now, I think is the most generous way to say it. And they beat Detroit because the Knicks had Jalen Brunson and Detroit did not have Jalen Brunson. And despite what some pundits said coming into the series, he ended up being the clear-cut best player in the series for my money. And the tertiary guys, especially in game 6, like played their butts off. Like they got like one of the better games from Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges as a trio that we've seen from them all season. And in a game where they basically won with just 4 guys, like that was ultimately enough for them. But like in terms of showing something that convinced me that they can pose a serious threat to Boston, that they can even pose serious questions to Boston in this series, like I didn't really see anything new from this team outside of the fact that in games 1 and 2, Karl Anthony Towns looked like a better defender than I've seen from him really at any point this year. But that ultimately did not last over the course of the series. And as we both know, Boston presents some harder questions for him than Detroit did.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of glad that you're there because although this is going to be less than a fight than I thought, because my feeling was that if Cade Cunningham had been just a little bit better, and he was great for a lot of the series, but a little bit better in that game 6, game 5, he hits the shot. Everybody talks about the foul, but if he just hits that jumper, then there are a couple of moments where you're like, oh, if Cade was just better. I'm not saying that they win the series, but you're probably looking at 7 at the very least. And in a 3-6 to go to have a realistic kind of make-miss situation of, hey, a couple of makes here, a couple of like if they don't turn the ball over at the end of game 6, and maybe if they get a clean shot, who knows, that you would have had a shot to tie and whatever. To be in that situation, I think is encouraging from a Boston perspective. You're like, okay, if the Pistons give you that problem, then I see Boston as, okay, if you take the Pistons and you make their defense better and you make their offense elite, now you've got the Celtics. And so if you had problems with the Pistons, how does that bode for, okay, the Celtics are going to give you even more challenges?
Yeah, I
Right?
do
I
think
mean,
yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. I think the one bit of relief for the Knicks is I think because Boston is substantially more talented than Detroit, this isn't going to turn into an MMA cage match, right? Like that,
yeah,
like
yeah.
Detroit really mucked up that series. And the officiating, like John, you watched the whole league, like we've seen it throughout the playoffs, and you experienced it playing the MMA Orlando Magic, right?
Yeah, man.
Um,
Yeah,
so
man.
so given that, I think there will be a certain relief from both teams to be out of the mud a little bit and in a series. And that's not to say Boston is obviously very physical at the point of attack. Those double big lineups gave the Knicks a lot of trouble, and Boston at times can bully you, and Jason Tatum can certainly bully you going towards the rim, but it's not going to be the same thing as like Tim Hardaway finding a way to push two guys on one play and not pick up a technical foul, or Dennis Schroeder just kind of like wrapping up on every screen, and that being allowed. That's not to say that the Knicks weren't physical and that the Knicks didn't commit a lot of bad fouls. I just think, unlike versions of Knicks past, where like even last year, like I think they would have tried to take the Celtics into the mud. I think because of the trades the Knicks made this offseason, because they tried to have a model a little bit more similar to Boston's, like it'll be a different type of series. And that's not to say obviously Boston is a far more significant challenge than Detroit is, but I do think there will be some relief from New York on that front.
I compared it to like you ever go to like I don't know like a wedding, you get all
Oh,
dressed up in the suit and everything, and then you get home, you like take the suit off, put a
yes.
t-shirt
Sweaty
and shorts, and
pants.
you're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh man, that feeling like that's the feeling like coming out of the Orlando series, and we'll get more to you'll ask me the questions in the next segment, but like coming out of that Orlando series, just playing the Knicks defense, it's just like, oh, all right, you're just not going to get mugged every time. You don't think, but it is the playoffs. So you're like, yeah, I'm sure a lot of these guys are like, oh, okay. I do get to wrap up on
Mhm.
a screen. I do to go over the top of a screen. I can actually hug the guy and get over the top rather than just die on the screen. So that's, I'm sure there's gonna be some level of that. But um, did you get enough out of Karl Anthony Towns? Do you feel good about where he is? Because even though recent history suggests, a better, and he look in was it game 5 where he hit some massive shots.
Yeah.
Um, so talk about beating the allegations. I mean, he has recently played better in the playoffs, but he also does have that stigma kind of still attached to him. How do you feel about where Karl Anthony Towns is after that series?
Not spectacular, just because I don't think they've really solved the question of what do you do when another team puts a wing on him. That Boston and Oklahoma City kind of started in the NBA, and every other team caught on. And they're like, all right, that's what the smart teams are doing. We're going to try that. And this Brunson cat pick and roll that for the first 30 or so games of the season was the most efficient pick and roll in the NBA, and slash pick and pop, like screening action, I guess, was one of the most used screening combos in the NBA. And like it's kind of been completely taken away, and this Knicks offense has been stripped bare to the point that like end of games, like it's the same as it was last year when half the roster was injured, which is Jalen Brunson, like please God save us. And the usage for Cat is just so inconsistent right now. Like Tibbs has done stuff to try to get him post touches early in the game, like setting him little cross screens, like quick entries from JB. Like the issue with all the stuff for the Knicks is they find solutions and then they seemingly go away from them, and they find a button that works and they just stop pressing it. So it doesn't seem like they have a really clean idea of how Cat fits into his offense. And Cat is so spectacularly talented that you can say all that, and he still puts up like an incredibly efficient, like whatever it was, like 22 points per game in this series, right? 48% from the field. I think something like 48% from three, 90% from the line. But a lot of it was like, even going back to game 1, was incredibly tough shot making from him. And he can do that, like we saw in game 4 against Boston, right? He was in the post. Boston was throwing 2-3 guys at him. He wasn't kicking out of it. Like he was pumping, he was like stepping through, he was waiting, and he was still finding ways to finish. It is just going to be like, can he continue to shoot make insane shots, basically, because they're not finding ways to get him a whole lot of easy looks. And the biggest thing with him is Boston really challenges him to say, we're going to throw 2 on you on your drives. Can you spray it out to the open shooter?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the answer is no. And even if the answer is yes, that open shooter will be Josh Hart. And then you have to ask the next question, is Josh Hart actually willing to shoot threes? And Josh shot really well against Detroit, but he still barely took them. So I think those things add up to me being a little uneasy about Cat. And I don't know if you want to talk more about it, but like that's not even getting into his defense, which certainly fell off a cliff towards the end of that series.
Well, literally my next question was, is Josh Hart going to be taking those shots? Because that's the defense. You know, we can get into Cat's defense later on when we talk about the regular season, but the plan, the Celtics plan is going to probably be, Porzingis on Josh Hart, and Horford on Cat with some help from, I don't know if Holiday is going to play early on or not. He probably is, I think. Derek, what, you put some size on Brunson, Porzingis on Hart. Is Hart going to be capable of hitting that shot, taking that shot?
So just to clarify, if Holiday is healthy, do you think Boston would still start games double big, or would they just have their normal starting lineup?
I think they'd go their normal starting lineup.
Gotcha.
So, and Horford off the bench, but there would be plenty of double big. There would be plenty of double big.
And that, I honestly think that was probably the biggest key to the Knicks coming within a Jason Tatum pull-up 3 of winning game 4, was that Horford was out for that game, and they didn't have to go against that double big look, because it definitely eased that burden a little bit. Josh shot well. He looked a little bit more confident shooting threes against the Pistons. So I'm hoping that continues and he can make enough to maybe make Boston think about it. But I think the fundamental issue here for the Knicks is, like, you have 2 solutions there, right? Either Josh takes and makes a bunch of threes, which we saw against the Sixers. Like, that is essentially what won the Knicks this series against the Sixers. They dared him to take threes in the first 2 games. He went whatever, like 9 for 16 or whatever. And that essentially carried the Knicks through the series. Or if he's not going to do that, you have to involve him in the action a lot, right? You have to use him as a screener. And we saw when the Knicks made that, depending on your perspective, faux comeback or real comeback in the 3rd game of the series between the 2 teams. It was because they got Josh into the action. He was setting good screens. He was playing well going 4 and 3 downhill. Jalen started making a lot of shots, getting KP switched onto him in space. But I think if you're the Knicks and you are hyper reliant on Josh Hart kind of being your second most involved piece offensively, you've already sort of lost the plot, right? Like he's a fantastic player. He was the only guy that I think through 6 games matched the Pistons' mettle and their toughness. And yet, if you are that reliant on him against a historically great offense like Boston, I just don't see how you keep up from a firepower perspective.
All right, we'll get more into this when we talk about the regular season and predictions later on. When we come back, you, Gavin, get to ask me questions about the Celtics. We'll do that in just a second. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. I have been very open about my mental health journey. I've benefited a lot from therapy, but a lot of people, especially men, a lot of you guys, I know you don't like therapy because you're afraid of being judged. Trust me, it's a great thing to open up, talk through some things, and it's just normal. It's just like going to the gym. It's just like eating healthy. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, so let's normalize getting help and encourage everyone to prioritize their well-being, because when people feel supported, families, workplaces, and entire communities are better for it. It's not about dealing with the big problems all the time. Sometimes it's just little things that you have to get through. But whatever it is, big, small, talking through it and getting a good therapist can help. With BetterHelp, you can get started easier than ever. It's fully online, the network of over 30,000 licensed therapists, and you can switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. You can even easily switch anytime, really anytime. So that's the big thing. You don't have to go searching for somebody else. They're right there. We're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA for 10% off your first month. It's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Hey, thank you for making our shows, whether you're a Knicks fan or a Celtics fan, your first listen every day. Listen to the other ones. If you're a Knicks fan, listen to Locked On Celtics. If you're a Celtics fan, listen to Locked On Knicks. This is the power of this network. Get the other side's perspective as the series goes on. So you can even hate listen. You can get into our comment sections on YouTube.
Leave comments. Leave some.
Get in there, fight with one another in the comments section if you have to. All right, so that's a little taste of Knicks after the Pistons. What do you want to know after the Celtics dispatch the Magic?
Yeah, similar to your first question for me, did you see anything in that first round series that changed your opinion about Boston in some meaningful way?
Um, n- no, nothing changed. But in fact, what it did was solidify the belief that the Celtics are honest when they say they want to win whatever way possible, like
Mhm.
whatever the game needs, whatever the series needs. I think game 5 proved that they are like people see the Celtics as a high volume three-point shooting team, which the stats show. I mean, you guys have seen it. Some of the highest volume three-point shooting has come against the Knicks. But the the Magic did a great job of limiting just the number of possessions. And I think the one stat that should probably scare the Knicks fans the most, I think Celtics fans know this stat, but the Celtics, even though they average like 103 points per game, scored at the same efficiency, points per possession and offensive rating as the Oklahoma City Thunder, who averaged 120 points per game. And the difference is the Thunder, who decimated the Grizzlies, got 102 possessions per game, and the Celtics got 90 possessions per game against the Magic. The Magic really, you talk about mucking it up, they slowed it down. But the Celtics, without shooting threes, found a way. They said, okay, fine. You want us to drive? We'll drive. And then they drove. Their percentage of three-pointers went from 60% of their attempts to 40% of their attempts. Their free throw rate skyrocketed. They scored 10 more points per game at the line. So they're still getting them in threes. They're just getting and ones. And so the Celtics, I think, coming out of the Magic series, it showed me that they're if you want to make this a wrestling match, make it a wrestling match. If you want to make it a track meet, make it a track meet. And I kind of like developed a new appreciation for just how differently they can win and just what like Jason Tatum is capable of doing.
I guess to that point, tell me a little bit about how the decision to play more double big lineups kind of changed this season for Boston. Because let me know if I'm off on this, but my understanding is things really took off when Boston said, "All right, we're going to play Horford and KP together. We're going to incorporate Luke Cornett and make him a substantial part of this rotation."
Yeah.
And just as a Knicks observer watching, those were the lineups that at times scared me the most with Boston, which is crazy to say when we saw game one, obviously, of the season was mostly about the Celtics just raining fire from three. But especially with Josh Hart on the floor, it just became suffocating for the Knicks to try to score against those lineups in particular.
Yeah, they have versatile bigs that are able to do a couple of different things. Like Al Horford, still, he's older, but he's still capable of at least getting out into the perimeter, moving fairly well. Luke Cornett, those guys do a great job kind of playing off of one another. And the competition has generally allowed the Celtics to play one big off of a non-shooter and have that big kind of pack the paint. So the Celtics defensive strategy has been, uh, you know, before Porzingis came back from his injury, the Celtics were allowing a ton in the paint. And that was like one of the early October, November storylines. Like, wow, you guys are getting crushed in the paint because the Celtics they had to start Horford and then bring Cornette off the bench, and their substitution pattern was always single big. And so they said, well, we're not going to let you beat us from three. We're going to hit a bunch of threes. You're going to hit a bunch of twos. And that's how we're going to math our way to this.
Mhm.
And then Porzingis came back and they said, okay, now we're going to allow a lot more threes, but the threes that we allow are going to be selective. And it opened them up to Dylan Brooks going nuts and beating them in a game. You had the odd kind of like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like it would be a Josh Hart. Like Josh Hart might win the Knicks a game in this series because he turns into Steph Curry for 35 minutes. And you're like,
Mhm.
okay, I didn't expect seven
Whoa,
three
whoa, whoa,
pointers.
whoa, John! This is Tom Thibodeau at 52 minutes. Okay.
That's right. I'm sorry. That's right. my bad.
Yeah.
Lost track of who I was.
Sorry about
But yeah. It's so the Celtics with their double big are going to be selective. Like that's where they have decided that they're going to close out on certain shooters. They're going to be less aggressive on they still want to challenge a little bit, make you
Mhm.
think, but that's what the double big has allowed them to do. Clog the paint. Like I said, Porzingis will play off of Josh Hart, clog the paint. Brunson loves to get to the rim. He won't be able to with the same, frequency. Uh, if Hart wins you a game, he wins you a game. The Missoula playbook is you we're betting that that's not going to win you 4 games out of 7. It might win you 1 or 2, but it won't win you 4. And they're going to take their chances with that. And the double big allows that.
Do you think Boston can be baited into playing a decent amount of ISO ball? Because I thought that was in that game 3 comeback, beyond using Josh in the action a little bit more. That was the biggest thing I think that the Knicks found, was that they switched Brunson a lot more aggressively. They switched Cat a lot more aggressively. And there were plays where Boston just scored, right? Because with Brunson, it was, all right, we're too big for you. We're taking you to the post and we're going to hit a turnaround fade over you. And there was nothing that it could do about that. And there were times where Jason Tatum just toasted Karl Anthony Towns. But overall, I think both those guys held up a little bit better than I expected. I don't know how sustainable it is to do that with Cat a bunch, because it just seems like he's going to get into foul trouble very quickly.
Yeah.
And then even at the end of game 4, like he had that, I think it was more on a closeout, but he had that foul on Tatum in the corner, and you just can't really count on him to not commit those fouls. Brunson, I think, held up shockingly well. Again, like, is that sustainable? Like his career tells you it probably isn't, but it does seem like that is preferable to the Knicks versus the Celtics collapsing the paint. Everyone races in. Knicks are playing in rotation. The Celtics go swing, 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 and inevitably it's Peyton Pritchard hitting like 8 threes in a row. Have teams been successful with that strategy, and what are Boston's counters if the Knicks go to something very switch heavy?
Yeah, I mean, their counter is to just attack it. They will go ISO. They will attack it. They will. The counter is to beat it into submission and say, okay, if you want to switch and give us these matchups, fine. I think what will happen is the best way to attack the Celtics is to give Porzingis the switch at the free throw line. Give him, if it's Brunson, if it's whoever, give him the switch at the free throw line and test him. See how to shoot. See if he's going to, because he had a horrible series against the Magic. He just couldn't hit anything. Get into his airspace, bother him, be physical, test the limits of what physicality is allowed. And if he can bury you with 15-foot jumpers, all right, then that's it. It's better to do that than to allow Tatum and Brown, because what's going to happen if you allow Tatum and Brown to attack is they're going to turn the corner, and it's going to test the discipline of the guys staying home on the perimeter. Orlando did it with great discipline. I don't know if the Knicks are going to have that same discipline. It's because I don't think it's their defensive style. And so they will be more likely to break ranks.
They trend towards over helping all season. I mean, that's kind of just the Tom Thibodeau defense. Also.
Right. And so you can't break that muscle memory. Somebody's going to do that little hitch, and that will either be too late and it's going to be a foul, or it'll be help when it wasn't supposed to be help, and somebody's going to be open in the corner. So just attack it, and then trigger the help defender's muscle memory into like, no, I can't do this anymore. I gotta go help. And that would be the way to go. But if you're talking about baiting ISO, let Porzingis try to cook and see if he can find his touch. And if he does, then you adjust. But that if I was coaching against Boston, that would be my plan.
Yeah, I had the same takeaway from Orlando. The Knicks they're pretty sturdy across the floor. They can sometimes lose against speed, but they, like Josh Hart, Jalen, Brunson, like low center of gravities. Obviously, KP can shoot over those guys with ease, but they will generally hold up if you're just trying to like bully ball back them down, which I'm sure we'll see Jalen Brown do at points and have some success. All right, how about we take one more break? We come back and we get into some takeaways from the regular season, some final questions that will define this matchup, and predictions. We'll get into all that next on both Locked On Knicks and Locked On Celtics.
Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you've ever looked at your bank account and said, where did my money go? I know I had more. Monarch Money comes in here to help. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money. You can start building wealth. When you start using Monarch Money, you can understand how much you're spending in food delivery. I used to live in New York. I lived in Manhattan. I know what food delivery costs, especially now with all the fees. It's easy to lose track. So Monarch Money can help you get a handle on that. And you're not juggling multiple apps. You can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, even plan long-term goals. If you're with a partner, you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Thanks for making Locked On Celtics, Locked On Knicks your first listen. We both host Locked On NBA Game Night. Gavin and I. You are Saturday nights, right? Saturday nights games.
Yeah, this week I'm doing Sundays. So tune in.
You're doing
Sunday when you hear this podcast. Yeah.
That's right. And I'm on Fridays. So what it is it covers the entire league. So playoff coverage, game coverage on the Locked On NBA feed. Check us out there on our days every day. It's a 7-day-a-week podcast. So go check out Locked On NBA Game Night. All right, Gavin. 4-0 regular season for Boston. I would say it would be easy for the Celtics to come in kind of overconfident because, look, the tone of this podcast for 20 plus minutes has been Boston has a lot of tools. The Knicks are not exactly equipped to deal with them. And the biggest takeaway I have from the regular season is the players the Knicks rely on most at one end of the floor are their biggest liabilities on the other end of the floor. So offensively, it's Brunson, it's Cat, but those are the guys that are attacked defensively. And defensively, you need Josh Hart. He's an incredible defender, but offensively, he hurts you. You need all of those guys on the floor, basically, Tom Thibodeau, at all times, but that gives the Celtics a target. That when I look at the regular season lesson, that's my biggest takeaway from those 4 games.
Yeah, it was not just against the Boston Celtics. Like the Knicks played their starting lineup substantially more than any other 5-man unit in the NBA. It was decidedly mediocre. I think, in fact, after the All-Star break, they had a negative net rating for the bulk of the Pistons series, despite playing, again, all the minutes. They had a negative net rating. They finished the series, I think, because of a good game 6 with a plus 3.4 net rating. So maybe that's a little encouraging, not super encouraging to me. I think it is a real issue because the premise of that lineup, to your point, like you kind of put it in a negative lens. If you wanted to throw it in a positive lens, it was that the 3 wings could compensate for Brunson and Cat defensively, and Brunson and Cat offensively could maybe compensate to some extent for those guys. But you didn't really need to because Josh Hart, at least until this year, just because he's such a good offensive rebound, and especially early in the season, he was shooting, I think, the best percentage at the rim of any non-big in the league. And maybe like at one point he was setting a record for 2-point field goal percentage of something like 78% on 2-pointers for like the first 30 games or something. Like he was ridiculous. He's been dealing with a knee issue, and he hasn't been quite as explosive around the basket. I think that's hurt his impact offensively, though I have to say against Detroit, like he was just full out, like playoff Josh Hart, like his level of effort, his intensity, like just what he brought on a possession-to-possession basis from a physicality perspective, the way he fought through screens off-ball defensively. Like it's hard to say that he was flat out a negative. And I do think the Knicks saw some encouraging things from Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, both in that series and towards the end of the regular season, particularly the stretch where Brunson was out. Bridges, like offensively, that was one of his better 6-game stretches as a Knick. He just didn't shoot the ball that well, but got to finish that game 6, I think, with 7 makes at the rim, including a vicious dunk at Cade Cunningham. This is a guy, John, who went about like a 30-game stretch only taking like 6 free throws or something. Like I'd have to double check that, but he's been so averse to contact all year. The idea that he might have unlocked something in that game 6 is encouraging. And OG Anunoby, to me, if the Knicks are going to have a chance in this series, like there's just such a massive burden on him on both sides of the ball. I thought the game he played against Tatum in game 4 against the Celtics was one of the best defensive games I've ever seen from a Knicks wing. And it's a testament to Tatum that he still had like an efficient 30 points. So a lot of it came when Mikal Bridges was on him. But I thought the way he denied Tatum, just how physical he was with him, The big thing with OG is like, given the burden he's had against Cade, the burden he'll have in this series against Tatum, he hasn't been able to be quite the same guy offensively he was during that Brunson-less stretch where he's putting up whatever, like an efficient 26, 27 a game. If he could somehow combine both those guys, which is a tall task, that would help the Knicks. If Mikal Bridges could keep attacking the rim and shoot better, that would help the Knicks. And to your point on the starting lineup being somewhat of a failed experiment, ideally they'd get something from their bench. But Deuce McBride has been terrible in these playoffs. To me, he's kind of the X factor in this series for the Knicks.
I looked up the numbers. The Knicks starting unit in the regular season played 940 minutes. The Minnesota starting unit played 714, and then third was Detroit at 491. So,
and that's with Brunson missing 15 games down the stretch of the
year. That's true. That's true. Oh my God, that would have been well over 1,000.
Yeah,
that would have been. The Celtics starting lineup, Porzingis missed a lot of time. So 357 minutes. They also have a 268 minute lineup with Horford instead of Porzingis. So, but still, that's a lot of minutes. That's a lot of minutes for those starters. I always expect them to break down, and what am I saying? Brunson with the turned right ankle, like the right ankle is where you push off if your guy you're defending is going right. So that's going to be tough for them to stop. It's going to be, I would hit him with every pick in the world and see how he handles it, and get him to break down. Like I'm a big believer in defending with your offense. And so you go out there, you hit with the screens, you test the limits. Again, you test the limits with physicality. You see if somebody's weak. Like Jason Tatum has, a bone bruise in his right wrist, his shooting wrist. I expect Knicks defenders to be slapping down on that wrist, trying to go for the ball. But hey, if you get the wrist, you get the wrist. Oh, too bad. Like that's all's fair in love and war in basketball, playoff basketball. So, I still, if we want to wrap this up and get into some of these predictions here, I still don't see it for New York here. I just think that, and I think we've talked about it before. I don't think this was ever going to be the year for New York. This was, you needed to get past the first round, and I don't know what's going to happen with Thibodeau after this. But I didn't know if Thibodeau would have survived if they lost that first round. You need more. You need more in New York, and this is going to be a pivotal offseason for them. But for now, in this series, I can give the Knicks at least one game for outlier shooting. I'm going to say Celtics in 5 with, leaving open like, okay, maybe Karl Anthony Towns wins you a game. I would be shocked if it goes 7. I think the Celtics coming out of that Magic series with all that rest, and I know the Knicks are getting some rest too, but there's a level of like confidence in having won the way that they won. And I think facing that defense now, they're like, I am untethered here, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I think looking forward to running the offense the way we know it. So I'm sorry, Knicks fans. I know this is where opposing fans call me arrogant. I'm going to say Celtics in 5.
Yeah, that was my prediction going into the playoffs. So I can't call you arrogant without maybe calling myself a self-hating Knicks fan. And we've gotten plenty of those YouTube comments. Shout out to you guys. But my brain says Celtics in 5. My gut says Celtics in 6. So I'm gonna ride with that. I have a feeling like I don't really know if the Knicks see the adjustments that need to be made. I don't know why. I have like a good feeling that the Knicks are going to come out and put their best possible foot forward. And it is a sad reality of this year's team, because I'll slightly disagree with you. Like, I think there was, and I know this wasn't exactly what you were saying, I think there is a higher ceiling for this group, even with just what they have right now. And I agree with you, to win a championship, They probably need one more wing. I think there was a far higher ceiling than what we saw from this team this year. And that is why I would lean Boston in 5, just because I think Boston has answers to everything the Knicks want to do, and the Celtics pose some questions that the Knicks just don't have answers to. I just have a feeling these guys are going to come out. They're going to be hyper competitive. And I think the thing, if you want to be optimistic as a Knicks fan, I think the Knicks just have great players. Like, I think all 5 guys in the starting lineup are just fantastic basketball players. I think OG can elevate a little bit more. I think Mikal can elevate a little bit more. I think Cat can have a better series. Jalen, it's hard to tell how healthy he's going to be, but if he's close to 100%, he can certainly win you a game. Just like if it's close down the stretch, like there will be games where he is the best guy on the floor in this series, and that'll just be enough for the Knicks. So I'm going to say Celtics in 6. I think there's maybe one game where Boston plays with their food a little bit too much and gets beat. I think there's one game where the Knicks are legitimately better. But I'll give it to Boston in 6.
I'll say this for my prediction: if OG Anunoby has, like, if he raises his game, that's a game changer, and that definitely adds something to the Knicks. At the same time, if Porzingis plays great, then that shaves off games. So like it can be, I'll say 5, but if I'm wrong on the Knicks side of it, it's because OG went off. If I'm wrong on the Celtics side of it, it's because Porzingis went off. And I think that's kind of like X factor. Or Josh Hart hit like a bunch of threes. So
sure.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Listen to each other's podcasts. Hate listen, hate watch throughout the series. Gavin, good talking to you, man.
Good talking to you too, John.